What if the life you want isn't missing information, but missing belief? What if everything you've been waiting for is waiting on you to decide? Right now, in this moment, you are closer to change than you think. Not someday, not when conditions are perfect, today. Because every breakthrough in your life begins the same way, with belief. Then comes action. Not once, not occasionally, but daily. And when belief fuels action, results don't have a choice. They follow. This isn't motivation, this is a formula. And once you understand it, you'll never see your life the same way again. Let's start at the real beginning. Before habits, before strategy, before effort. Everything in your life begins with belief. Not the kind of belief you say out loud, not the motivational quote belief, but the belief that lives quietly underneath your decisions. The belief that shows up when no one is watching. Because long before you take an action, long before you make a choice, you've already decided what's possible for you. And that decision, conscious or unconscious, becomes the blueprint for your future. Think about it. Two people can be given the exact same opportunity, same resources, same timing, same access. One sees a door and walks through it. The other sees a wall and turns away. The difference isn't intelligence. It isn't luck. It's belief. One person believes this is for people like me. The other believes this isn't. And the mind will always prove itself right. Always. Your beliefs act like a filter. They determine what you notice, what you ignore, what you pursue, and what you avoid. If you believe success requires suffering, you'll sabotage joy when it shows up. If you believe money changes people, you'll push it away the moment you start to get close. If you believe you're not enough yet, you'll keep waiting for some day that never comes. Beliefs are powerful, but here's the part most people miss. They are learned, not permanent, which means they can be unlearned. At some point in your life, you didn't believe you could walk. You didn't believe you could speak. You didn't believe you could do 1,000 things you now do without thinking. Those limitations weren't real. They were temporary beliefs. And the only reason they changed is because you acted as if more was possible before you had proof. That's how belief is built. Through experience, not thinking. Most people say, once I believe, then I'll act. But that's backwards. Belief often follows action. You don't wait until you're confident to take the step. You take the step and confidence shows up. You don't wait until you believe you're capable. You move and capability reveals itself. Motion creates emotion and emotion reinforces belief. That's the loop. Now here's the truth that might shake you a little. You are always acting in alignment with what you believe. Always. Even when you say you want more, if your actions don't match, it's not a motivation problem. It's a belief problem. You don't yet believe it's possible, safe, or necessary. And until that shifts, no strategy in the world will save you. Belief sets your standards, and your standards control your life. You don't get what you want. You get what you tolerate. If you believe exhaustion is normal, you'll live tired. If you believe mediocrity is acceptable, you'll settle quietly. You believe you're meant for more, you'll feel uncomfortable staying where you are. That discomfort is not a problem. It's a signal that your identity is expanding. Let me ask you something. When life knocks you down, and it will, what do you make it mean? Do you believe it's proof that you're failing? Or do you believe it's training? Because the meaning you assign in those moments determines whether you quit or rise. Two people experience the same setback. One says, this always happens to me. The other says, this is shaping me. Same event, different belief, completely different future. Belief is not pretending everything is easy. Belief is deciding that no matter how hard it gets, you are stronger. Belief is not blind optimism. It's grounded certainty that you will figure it out. That certainty changes the way you breathe, the way you stand, the way you speak, and the way you show up. People feel it before you say a word. And here's the most important part. Belief is a choice you reinforce daily. You either feed empowering beliefs or you starve them. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, belief grows. Every time you break one, it weakens. That's why daily action matters so much, because it's not just producing results, it's building identity. You start believing you're the kind of person who follows through, the kind of person who doesn't quit, the kind of person who finishes what they start. You don't need to believe you'll win forever. You just need to believe in the next step. Belief doesn't require certainty about the destination, only commitment to movement. When you believe first, even imperfect action becomes powerful. Even small steps become proof, and proof compounds. So if you want a different life, don't start by asking what you should do. Start by asking what you must believe to live that life. Then act in alignment with that belief today, not someday. Because once belief is in place, action becomes natural, consistency becomes possible, and results stop being a mystery. Believe first, everything else will follow. Now, once belief is in place, something even more powerful comes into play: identity. Because belief answers what you think is possible, but identity answers who you believe you are. And who you believe you are will always dictate what you do, what you avoid, and what you allow in your life. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity every single time. Most people try to change their life by setting goals. Goals are important, but goals alone don't change behavior. Identity does. If deep down you see yourself as someone who struggles, you'll unconsciously create struggle. If you see yourself as someone who never finishes, you'll quit right before the breakthrough. And if you see yourself as someone who's disciplined, focused, and committed, your actions will start lining up without you having to force them. Here's why this matters so much. Your identity acts like a thermostat. No matter how high things go, it pulls you back to what feels familiar. You get a little success, then self-doubt creeps in. You start winning, then you find a way to slow it down, not because you're broken, but because your identity hasn't caught up with your potential yet. The mind always seeks consistency with how it sees itself. Think about the language you use when you talk about yourself. I'm not a morning person. I'm bad with money. I've always been like this. Those aren't facts. Those are identity statements. And every time you repeat them, you're reinforcing a version of yourself that no longer serves you. The brain listens. The body follows. Identity is not something you're born with. It's something you build through repeated actions and reinforced emotions. Every experience you give meaning to becomes a brick in the structure of who you believe you are. That means if you want to change your identity, you don't start with a massive transformation. You start with small, deliberate actions that give your brain new evidence. When you do one small disciplined thing, even when you don't feel like it, you're not just completing a task. You're casting a vote for the person you're becoming. One workout doesn't make you fit. One focused hour doesn't make you successful. But each action says, this is who I am now. And identity is built one vote at a time. Most people wait for motivation. But motivated people don't win, committed people do. Commitment is an identity decision. It's saying, this is what I do, this is how I show up. When you decide that quitting is not part of who you are, your brain stops negotiating. And when the negotiation ends, progress accelerates. Here's the shift that changes everything. Stop asking, what should I do today? And start asking, who must I be today? Because when you act from identity, discipline becomes easier. Focus becomes natural. Consistency stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like alignment. Look at your past for a moment. There are areas where you're incredibly consistent without effort. Why? Because they match your identity. You don't need motivation to protect what you value. You don't need reminders to be who you already believe you are. That's the power of identity-driven behavior. And when life challenges you, and it will, it's your identity that determines how you respond. If you see yourself as a victim, you'll look for excuses. If you see yourself as a leader, you'll look for solutions. Same pressure, different identity, different outcome. Now, here's the part most people underestimate. Identity is shaped not just by what you do, but by what you tolerate. What you allow into your life becomes a statement about who you think you are worthy of being. Raise your standards and identity rises with it. Lower your standards and identity follows downward. Standards are the bridge between belief and behavior. You don't need to reinvent yourself overnight. You need to upgrade the story you're living into. Stories shape identity, and identity shapes destiny. The moment you decide, I am someone who shows up, even when it's uncomfortable, everything starts to shift. Your actions align. Your confidence grows. Why? Our results begin to reflect the change. So decide today, not when it's easy, not when you're ready, but now, who you are becoming. Act like that person. Speak like that person. Hold yourself to the standards of that person. Because the fastest way to change your life is to change the identity you were living from. Decide who you are, and your actions will follow. Once belief is established and identity begins to shift, there's only one thing left that turns potential into progress. What you do every single day, not once in a while, not when you feel inspired, daily action. Because success is not built in moments of intensity, it's built in moments of consistency. And most people don't fail because they lack talent or desire. They fail because they underestimate the power of small actions repeated over time. People love breakthroughs. They love dramatic transformations. But real change rarely announces itself with fireworks. It shows up quietly through habits so small they almost feel insignificant. One extra page read, one difficult conversation handled with courage, one decision to show up when it would be easier to disappear. These moments don't feel heroic in the moment, but they are stacking momentum whether you notice it or not. Here's the truth. Your life today is the result of what you've been practicing daily, not what you intend, not what you hope, what you practice. If you practice avoidance, your life reflects it. If you practice discipline, your life rewards it. And the mind is always learning from repetition. What you do often becomes who you are. Most people wait for motivation to act, but motivation is unreliable. It's emotional. It comes and goes. If your progress depends on how you feel, your results will always be inconsistent. Daily action removes emotion from the equation. It creates structure. It creates certainty, and certainty creates momentum. Momentum is powerful because once it starts, it carries you forward even on days when your energy is low. Think about pushing a heavy object. At first, it feels impossible, but once it's moving, keeping it moving takes far less effort. Daily action is what gets the object moving. Miss too many days and you stop the motion. But stay consistent and suddenly progress feels natural. Small actions matter because they bypass resistance. Your mind resists massive change, but it accepts small steps. That's why daily action works. You don't overwhelm yourself. You train yourself. You prove to your nervous system that growth is safe, and safety creates sustainability. Here's what most people don't realize. Daily action is not just about results. It's about identity reinforcement. Every time you show up, even imperfectly, you send a message to yourself, I follow through. That message builds self-trust, and self-trust is the foundation of confidence. You don't become confident by thinking about it. You become confident by keeping promises to yourself. The compound effect is real. 1% better each day doesn't look impressive in the moment, but over time it's unstoppable. Small habits compound into massive change, just like small neglect compounds into regret. What you do consistently either works for you or against you. There's no neutral. Daily action also builds emotional strength. When you train yourself to act despite discomfort, you expand your capacity. What once felt hard becomes normal. What once felt impossible becomes expected. That's how growth happens, not by avoiding discomfort, but by normalizing it. And let's be honest, there will be days you don't feel like showing up. Days when progress feels invisible. Days when you question whether it's worth it. Those days are not obstacles. They are the test. Anyone can act when it's easy. The separation happens, and it's hard. That's where character is built. You don't need to do everything. You need to do the right few things consistently. Progress is not about perfection. It's about persistence. Missing one day doesn't destroy momentum. Quitting does. Get back in motion as fast as possible. Speed of recovery matters more than speed of progress. Daily action also sharpens focus. When you commit to showing up every day, distractions lose power. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You build rhythm, and rhythm creates flow. Over time, results begin to show. At first, they're subtle, more clarity, more confidence, more energy. Then they become visible. Opportunities appear. People respond differently. Outcomes improve. And suddenly, what once required effort now feels like who you are. That's when people say you're lucky. They don't see the daily work. They don't see the quiet discipline. They don't see the consistency. But luck is just preparation meeting opportunity, and daily action is preparation in its purest form. So don't wait for the perfect plan. Don't wait for confidence. Don't wait for permission. Take the step, then take the next one. Show up today, show up tomorrow. Let consistency do the heavy lifting. Small actions done daily change everything. Now here's where everything either accelerates or falls apart. Emotion. Because you can have belief, you can even know who you want to be, and you can understand the value of daily action. But if you don't learn how to manage your emotional state, none of it lasts. Emotion is the fuel. It's the force behind every decision you make. Logic might tell you what makes sense, but emotion determines what you actually do. Every action you take is driven by how you feel in the moment. You don't procrastinate because you don't know what to do. You procrastinate because of how you feel. When you think about doing it, you don't quit because the goal is impossible. You quit because the emotional pain of continuing feels heavier than the emotional pain of stopping. So if you want consistent action, you must learn to consistently generate empowering emotional states. Most people live at the effect of their emotions. They wake up tired, discouraged, distracted, and they let that state decide their behavior. But peak performers don't wait for emotion. They create it. They understand that emotion is not something that happens to you. It's something you generate through focus, physiology, and meaning. Change your focus and you change how you feel. Focus on what you're losing and you feel fear. Focus on what's possible and you feel hunger. Focus on the past and you feel regret. Focus on growth and you feel momentum. Where focus goes, energy flows. And most people don't lack energy. They're just focusing on the wrong things. Your body plays a bigger role than you realize. The way you stand, breathe, and move sends signals to your nervous system. Slouched posture, shallow breathing, slow movement. Your body thinks you're under threat. Upright posture, deep breathing, purposeful movement. Your body prepares for action. You can shift your emotional state in seconds by changing your physiology. Motion creates emotion. Then there's meaning. The meaning you assign to events shapes how you feel about them. Two people face the same challenge. One says, this is happening to me. The other says, this is happening for me. Same event, completely different emotional state. Meaning is power, and the meaning you choose determines whether a moment weakens you or strengthens you. Here's the mistake most people make. They try to discipline their actions without conditioning their emotions. That's like trying to drive a car without fuel. You might move for a moment, but you'll stall quickly. Sustainable action comes from emotional alignment. When your emotions support your goals, effort feels lighter, resistance decreases, momentum builds. Certainty is one of the most powerful emotional states you can generate. When you're certain, fear has no room to breathe. Uncertainty drains energy. Certainty multiplies it. Uncertainty doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from deciding. The moment you decide that no matter what happens, you will find a way, your emotional state shifts instantly. Passion is another fuel. Passion doesn't come from comfort. It comes from purpose. When your actions are connected to something bigger than yourself, energy shows up. You can push longer. You can endure more. You can stay consistent even when progress is slow. Purpose turns effort into meaning. But let's be real. There will be days when you feel flat, days when emotion is low. That's not failure. That's being human. The key is not to eliminate low states, but to shorten them. Peak performers don't avoid negative emotions. They recover quickly. Speed of emotional recovery determines long-term success. When you feel off, don't ask what's wrong with me. Ask what am I focusing on right now? Ask how am I using my body? Ask what meaning am I giving this moment? Those questions give you control, and control restores power. Daily rituals matter because they condition emotional states. What you do first thing in the morning sets the tone. What you do consistently trains your nervous system. When you prime yourself daily, physically, mentally, emotionally, you don't rely on chance. You create readiness. Emotion also influences how others respond to you. People don't follow words, they follow energy. Confidence, certainty, presence, those are emotional states, and they're contagious. When you manage your state, you elevate everyone around you. And here's the deepest truth. Emotion is what makes action sustainable. Willpower burns out. Discipline gets tired. But when action is fueled by emotion, by meaning, certainty, and purpose, it becomes part of who you are. You stop forcing yourself forward and you start being pulled by something stronger. So if you want to act consistently, don't start with the task. Start with your state. Create the emotion that makes action inevitable. Because when emotion is aligned, action flows, consistency becomes natural, and progress accelerates. Master your emotions and you master your momentum. Now let's talk about results, because results are the language of reality. You can have the best intentions in the world, the most powerful affirmations, the strongest desire to change. But at the end of the day, your results tell the truth. They don't judge you. They don't lie. They simply reflect back what you've been believing, how you've been acting, and the standards you've been living by. Most people want different results without becoming a different version of themselves. They want the reward without the repetition, the outcome without the process. But results are not random. They are not luck. They are feedback. And when you learn to read that feedback honestly, you gain control over your life. If you don't like your results, that's not a reason to feel shame. It's a reason to get curious, because every result points back to an input. What you're thinking, what you're focusing on, what you're doing consistently, those are the levers. Change the inputs and the outputs must change. Life works like a system and you are the one operating it. Here's where people get stuck. They personalize results. They see a lack of progress and think something is wrong with me. That belief shuts growth down. But results are not a verdict on your worth. They are a signal about your approach. Separate who you are from what you're producing, and suddenly you're free to improve without self-attack. Results expose standards, not what you say your standards are, but what they truly are. You always act in alignment with your deepest standards. If you say health matters, but you neglect your body, the standard is convenience. If you say growth matters, but you avoid discomfort, the standard is comfort. And again, there's no judgment, only clarity. Awareness is power. Most people wait for results before they commit fully. They say, once I see progress, I'll go all in. But that's not how growth works. Commitment precedes results. The moment you commit to raising your standards, behavior shifts, and when behavior shifts consistently, results follow as a consequence. Results also reveal patience, or the lack of it. In a world of instant gratification, people expect immediate change. But meaningful results often lag behind effort. There's a delay, and that delay is where most people quit. Not because it's not working, but because they can't see it working yet. Understanding this gap is crucial. Progress is often happening underground long before it becomes visible. Think about planting a seed. You don't dig it up every day to see if it's growing. You water it, you protect it, you trust the process. Results require the same patience. Just because you don't see immediate proof doesn't mean the work isn't compounding. Results also sharpen focus. When you stop making excuses and start measuring outcomes, clarity increases. You stop arguing with reality and start learning from it. Measurement brings truth, and truth brings improvement. But here's something important. Results are not the end goal, they're the mirror. The real win is who you become in the process. Results come and go. Identity stays. When you build the habits, beliefs, and emotional control required to produce results, you gain something far more valuable than any outcome, the ability to create again. When you succeed, don't get arrogant. Study what worked. When you fail, don't get discouraged. Study what didn't. Both success and failure are teachers. The only mistake is refusing to learn. As your results improve, so must your standards. What once felt like success becomes your new normal. That's growth. And growth requires continual recalibration, new level, new demand, new vision, new discipline. This is how progress stays alive. Here's the final truth. Results are not a coincidence. They are the natural byproduct of belief, identity, daily action, and emotional alignment working together. When those elements are aligned, results are inevitable. Not overnight, not effortlessly, but inevitably. So instead of wishing for better outcomes, become the person who produces them. Let your results guide you, not define you. Results don't lie, and when you listen, they show you exactly how to win. And now we arrive at the final turning point, the moment where everything you have heard either becomes a life you live or just another idea you admired. This is where commitment shows up. Not the kind of commitment that depends on mood or circumstances, but the kind that's decided in advance. Because the real separator between those who create extraordinary results and those who stay stuck isn't talent, intelligence, or even opportunity. It's the decision to commit before there's proof. Most people wait. They wait for confidence. They why? For clarity. They wait for signs that it's going to work, but waiting is a trap. Because confidence doesn't come first, action does. Proof doesn't come first, commitment does. The moment you decide fully, something shifts inside you. Your brain stops searching for escape routes and starts finding solutions. When commitment is conditional, effort is inconsistent. But when commitment is absolute, behavior changes. You stop asking, should I keep going? And start asking, how do I make this work? That question alone changes everything. It activates creativity, resilience, and resourcefulness. Problems don't disappear, but your response to them transforms. Think about any area of your life where you've been truly committed. You didn't need motivation. You didn't negotiate with yourself. You just did what needed to be done. That's the power of a decision made once and reinforced daily. Decisions free energy. Indecision drains it. Here's the truth most people avoid. If quitting is an option, it will eventually be taken. The mind looks for comfort under pressure, but when quitting is removed from the equation, the mind adapts. It gets stronger. It gets sharper. You don't rise because the path is easy. You rise because you refuse to stop. Commitment doesn't mean certainty about the outcome. It means certainty about your response. No matter what happens, you will just learn and continue. That mindset creates emotional stability. You stop riding the highs and lows. You stay grounded in forward motion. And here's the paradox. Once you commit fully, fear loses its grip. Fear thrives in uncertainty. When you decide, fear still shows up, but it no longer controls you. You act with fear instead of waiting for fear to leave. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's movement in spite of it. Commitment also reshapes identity. The moment you commit, you become someone who follow. WS through. And that identity fuels daily action. You don't need external pressure. You become internally driven. Consistency becomes a reflection of who you are, not something you force yourself to do. There will be moments when progress slows, moments when results don't match effort, moments when doubt whispers that you should stop. Those moments are not signs to quit. They are invitations to deepen commitment. Every breakthrough is preceded by a moment when quitting feels justified. That's the test. When you commit before seeing results, you activate faith, not blind faith, but disciplined faith. Faith expressed through action. You show life that you're serious. and life responds to seriousness. Opportunities appear, resources align, people show up, not because the world is magical, but because commitment sharpens your awareness and expands your reach. You stop dabbling, you stop trying, you start building, and building takes time. But when commitment is firm, time becomes an ally instead of an enemy. You're no longer rushing for validation, you're focused on progress. Here's what commitment really means. It means you're willing to be misunderstood, willing to be uncomfortable, willing to fail forward, willing to look foolish for a while. Most people avoid commitment because they fear judgment more than stagnation, but growth demands risk, and risk demands commitment. When you commit, you raise your standards permanently. You no longer accept half effort from yourself. You stop settling for excuses. You stop negotiating with the voice that wants to keep you small. You lead yourself first. Here's the most powerful part. Commitment creates momentum that outlives emotion. Even on days when belief feels shaky, identity feels challenged, and energy feels low, commitment carries you forward. It becomes the anchor that keeps you moving when everything else wavers. So don't wait for proof. Don't wait for permission. Decide now. Decide who you are. Decide how you show up. Decide what you will no longer tolerate. And then act in alignment with that decision day after day. Commit first and let results catch up.